The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in.
Just me and cocaine and a revolver.
That's a great way to start this episode.
Hell yeah. It'd be better if you guys didn't awkwardly freeze when I said weird shit. It's called yes anding, people. Get in there. Okay, that's fine. Let's do this. Comic books.
All right, well, welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and no cocaine in a sea of comics.
Nope.
I'm Noah.
Kayla.
Jared. Sorry. No, I'm good.
I mean,
I'm good. I'm good. I'm normal. I'm good.
You're a comedian, so it's kind of in the in the job.
In the wheelhouse. Yeah.
So today we are talking about new. It's heroes, right? Yeah. New heroes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, superheroes. There was some debate.
Yeah, there was some debate. That's why I was like, wait, I know I picked heroes. Did you guys? So,
We literally
yeah,
don't
so
know what we were doing.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So
You know what's going on.
I mostly do. I figure it out once I edit it, so that's when I figure out what's happening. So yeah, we decided to talk about new comic book characters that were introduced from 2010 to now. So a good decade of characters that have been introduced, why they're introduced, why they seemingly disappear, and why they don't work, but why they do work.
Yeah.
And because I argue that the last 10 years there's been a shit ton of new characters that not only have been successful, but also haven't been successful.
Wow, what a stance.
Yeah. Noah's position on the matter is things have happened, but then other things did not.
I
So,
mean, how else would you explain it?
no,
Some
it's very
characters
true.
Were loved, and some were not.
That's what I just said.
Well, that's true. Well, look, no, but I mean, I think that part of the thing that Noah's kind of getting at is that there. If I could explain this, and I just like make some nonsense up. No. Seriously, I think there's a few things going on about why it seems like more new characters have been sort of introduced lately. I think some of it is, and we should probably talk about this in a bit, but that there's been more conspicuous launches of characters, and a lot of that has to do with Marvel, mostly Marvel, but also DC's like diversity push. So I would say that they're like, I feel like what people don't necessarily recognize about comic books is that new characters are always being introduced, constantly. The thing is, they just don't usually stick around, or at least it's not a given.
Yeah, I mean, they'll show up for an issue, fuck shit up, and then be gone for like 15 years, and then come back.
They'll randomly make an appearance as Dick Grayson's current girlfriend, because he goes through those really fast.
That's like its own subgenre.
Kayla's like, yeah, most characters that are introduced they know Dick Grayson. That's the big thing. That's what they're known for.
I mean, kind of close. It's true. I mean, there's been, and like you said with the diversity push. I mean, I'm all for it, and it's weird to say diversity push because it makes it sound like they're pushing it, which they are. But
Wow,
it's a
Noah's really
good no. But I'm
articulate
saying no. But yeah, I know. I don't know what's happening to me today. I'm like doing the thought process out loud.
It sounds like they're pushing it. It's because they are.
No, but
I'm gonna have to write Noah a script from now on. Honestly,
I only mean that that word is usually negatively associated, especially with entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case,
You mean with bigots?
Yes, that's yay. There we go. See, that's why I have.
Well, no, actually, let's kind of tackle this up top. I was hoping to push this back later, but we'll go ahead and tackle this sort of up top, and then we'll get to the more general stuff. Because actually, this is funny. I mean, you've heard that sort of expression that like when a dominant group loses privilege, that they take that as oppression. Well, the thing, so what's funny is that even I had a bias here because I agreed. I thought, oh, there's this huge diversity push, and all of the new characters that have been introduced have been non-white, non-male, non-heterosexual, and as a gay person myself, that's kind of cool. I'm not against it. But the point is, I thought it was this thing that was happening. Well, as you guys know, I did this big, long preparation of like all these characters. I looked at the top 50 most pronounced new characters that have been produced in the last 10 years. And what's crazy is most of them were still white. And most of them were male, but barely. Like the one thing that I will say, looking at like this
half dog.
Well, no. The reason I say this is that there wasn't that big a male majority. Like it was just barely. So there actually has been a pretty like kind of 50-50 split in terms of gender. But with these top 50, like, let's see, I was able to identify like 17 white characters, only 9 black, 11 Latino, 8 Asian, 3 Middle Eastern, no Pacific Islander or Indian, and 2 others, which is really sad for American Indian people that they were like 2 aliens introduced, but not any. I mean, but anyway.
But if you look at like even with what you just said, that's the step in the right direction. I mean, that's a lot of characters,
absolutely is, yeah.
Especially, Latina and stuff like what you just said. I mean, that's a big jump. That's a huge introduction.
It's huge.
All of this stuff. 14 is clearly driving him mad.
It's increasing my rigor is what's happening.
No, but I mean, it's interesting to see it in the number. Yes, I mean, a lot of white males have been introduced, but with all the other numbers you're saying, and even women and females being introduced, that's a lot more than there usually was. Or if you look back in comics, I mean, even villains were mostly male too. So it's really cool to see them going that way. And this is probably only considering with the big 2, Marvel and DC. That's not considering all the other comics that have come out with female leads.
And that's why I mentioned like these are the most prominent ones. But so this is my point, which I completely agree with you that it's a step in the right direction. But what I thought was funny is if you just checked on the internet outrage and you looked at like message boards and stuff like that, you would think that it was like a 90% non-white to 10%. Introduction of new characters. In other words, they were suggesting every new character, but it just hasn't been the case. As a matter of fact, this is as close to diversity, just in terms of just sheer numbers, in terms of characters that were introduced, that I think have ever existed.
Yeah, I bet the numbers though would reflect if you look at maybe the title characters are probably still predominantly white and male. I feel like.
That's right.
This is kind of introducing or kind of like, I guess, segueing into another section of your beautiful doc. But obviously there are different types of...
I got docs for days.
Oh gosh, I keep scrolling. There's more. But most of the characters introduced aren't launching new complete series. Most of them are
true.
Like side characters or part of an ensemble cast with still predominantly white male like title characters. So it's not like the tides haven't turned. It's not like the main Wonder Woman comic is a really powerful black woman. It's
right.
They've added.
No, you're absolutely right.
I see that as I call that Batman and the Outsider syndrome, where they use these big characters and big title characters to introduce other characters. Or even if you look at, like I said, the Batman and the Outsiders, that whole team is made up of characters that are pretty well known or people like them. They just don't necessarily have their own comic, but they use Batman to get people to buy it. So it's like, I see why they do it. It is fairly annoying that to read, if you want, I don't know, a comic with like Aqualad or something in it. It's like he doesn't necessarily have his own comic unless it's in Teen Titans or Titans or Aquaman. You know, so I mean, I don't know how they make the decision. I guess it's the popularity of them.
Well, the thing I would say is that like each way of introducing new characters, you kind of has its own advantages and disadvantages. You know what I mean? Like there are reasons I think that, I mean, one, I wanted to kind of say earlier too, we can't forget one of the reasons new characters get produced generally is it drives stories. And I think that gets forgotten a lot, is that like, if you have a, Superman story, right? I mean, every month he's got to have a different sort of arc. And one way to do that is for a new character, like a supporting character, to be introduced. Right. You know, so in other words, like, and it's happened plenty of times, especially in Batman, and not even just like the Robins, right? I mean, it'll just be some other crime fighter in Gotham. Like I think like Gotham Girl, sort of a great example of that. She's not a Robin, she's just a supporting character because that story drove like basically one of Batman's arcs. So I think is
an amazing story, by the way, and I love Gotham Girl. I just wanted to point that out, but that is true. I mean, you don't. I'm just saying you should read it. I mean, it's Tom King's like first 3 trades, first like I don't know 16 issues, but.
Sorry,
very up.
Gotham Girl on the dock is hilarious to me. The last line,
very up and down.
Behind the scenes is she's clearly a filthy, betraying scumbag.
And that's why I love her.
Spoilers.
No, but I mean that's true. They're not going to introduce. This is a bad example, but you just brought her up. So they're not going to introduce Gotham Girl into a new comic or waste resources and money and time on a Gotham Girl comic.
Can you imagine the outrage? There are no meta-humans in Gotham.
Right. And also, like, who is she? Like, why? Who's going to buy that? You know, like, they have to be introduced in, you know, a comic that's already established to then later on get their own or possibly not and just be, like what Jared's talking about, a story-driven character.
Well, that's at least to say that's, like, the easiest way to do it. Mm-hmm. I think of all that's the most common way to introduce characters. It's the one that like gets immediately the most readership because you're already reading Spider-Man or Batman. And so if you're a writer, you know, and you want to introduce a new character, you have a character in mind. It's
right.
Yeah, oh, and exactly. You're already writing Batman, and you've had this character in the back of your head cooking for a long time, as every creator does. So it's a kind of cost-free. It like kills a bunch of birds with a single stone. Awesome stuff. Yeah. Then there's another one which we probably shouldn't spend too much time on because this is going to be an episode in the future. But there's legacy characters.
Yeah.
That's a sort of a big tradition in new characters, and you want to kind of cover that, Noah.
Oh, why? Because of the Flash?
Yeah. I mean, basically, but also just because this is one of those things where if like you're a comic book fan, legacy characters is just part of your vocabulary because it's such a thing. But like if you're listening to this and you're kind of a noob to the whole like comic book thing, you probably don't have as strong a sense of what that means.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess if you are a noob, that legacy characters are characters that take on
the mantle.
Yeah, I'd say a mantle or like a way, ideals or whatever of an established character. So if you, like I said, the Flash, there's Wally West, there's the other Wally West, there's Bart, there's...
No, that's not confusing.
Oh, God, don't even get me started. But that's a good point. So with legacy characters... When they get, you know, Batman, it's not so confusing because most of the Robins go off to be other characters. But with the Flash, I'm using him as an example because I feel like his legacy characters have not been handled well.
And also, you kind of like the Flash, right, Noah? I mean,
just a tiny itty bitty bit.
Familiar with him? So.
He's like, okay, I have like.
Noah's like, who, me? No,
I'm wearing all red. No, I mean, so there's Jay Garrick, and then. The multiverse was introduced, and then there was Barry Allen, and then they meet, and then Wally West gets powers the same way that Barry did, but he became Kid Flash, and then Barry died, and then Wally became Flash, and then Wally went away, and Barry came back, and then there's a new Wally West that is Iris's nephew that has the...
Okay, so, but what is a legacy
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting to. So it's these people that are either... come from the same place, they do planet whatever, and they exemplify the same powers, and they take up the mantle. We've already said that. I mean, what?
Yeah. Well, but I was going to say, like, to even taking up the mantle is a bit like, you know what I mean? That's almost like referencing comic books or whatever.
Right.
In other words, there's not a lot of other mantle taking place in other contexts.
No.
Not impossible, but yeah. So basically, it's when a character, like a sort of main popular superhero character, hands off it to another person.
Gains a sidekick.
Hands off their identity. Yeah, but it's not a sidekick usually, because usually there's a period of replacement, and I think that's what's central here. So it's not like, and I actually think yes, yeah, because in a weird way, Flash is like a more advanced version of this. Flash Family is almost a more sophisticated version, because you'll have like Flashes running concurrently. No pun intended with the running thing. They're just like at the same, like there'll be like 4 Flashes. Same with Green Lantern. Green Lantern can be a bit confusing because you have a bunch of Green Lanterns. I
wouldn't consider Green Lanterns legacy characters though. Only because
not now, but originally there was a kind of linear replacement. Yeah.
True.
But anyway, yeah. So that's another way. Like basically, you want to introduce a new character, you replace an old sort of classic character with this new secret identity. So instead of Superman, some new loser becomes Superman, whatever. And then usually, yeah, exactly. And then usually goes away after 3 or 4 years. Like the trajectory for most of these characters is they usually, the original comes back to replace them.
Mm-hmm. The Flash took 15 years, but that's fine.
I'd say the next thing to kind of cover is like the bang for your buck here. The way, or maybe the glut of new characters are introduced are in ensemble team books.
Right.
That's like I don't want to say cheap and easy, but it's definitely, you want to introduce 4 or 5 new characters. When you get the easiest way is if you're a writer, you take over the Justice League. You got 4 new characters that you can come up with, or even better, the Teen Titans, because they're young.
Mm-hmm. That's even the case for most, Justice League Avengers or any big team book with the villains. A lot of the times, like a big major well-known villain would be behind the scenes, kind of puppeting all of it. Mm-hmm. But then there's this new, lesser-known villain that's doing all the dirty work, and then you eventually find out whatever. But I feel like they do that a lot, where the villain is kind of new, but I feel like it's an easy way for them to like experiment with the villain and then take it away. So it's kind of in lines with the just driving the plot, essentially.
I think introducing a new villain is kind of like the easy way to test the waters.
Right,
because if the audience doesn't respond well, it's like, time to die. And in team books,
that's true.
Shortcut for writers, so they can test the waters and see if aesthetically or just personality wise, this new character is gonna go over well with the audience. But in ensemble cast books, it's not like they're gonna have pages and pages of dialogue for this new character, because they're sharing the screen, so to say, the page, with like 20 other people. So I don't know. I just feel like both of those ways are kind of like tiptoeing into introducing a new character.
How do you?
Yeah, it's true.
How do you guys feel like? So, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying they're new characters or whatever. So whenever they introduce, they're not necessarily villains, but so with like Civil War II, with that Inhuman that could see the future, or even like Hope Summers being the new Phoenix and stuff like that. So how do you feel when they, like, it's a newish character and they kind of haven't been around for so long, and then they use them as like the main driving force for the story, but then after that story is done, they kind of just fade back into the background? Like, do you feel like that? How am I trying to say this? Do you feel? Do you feel like that could help the character or doesn't help the character?
I feel like it can help them.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when else, like, how else are they going to ever kind of get a genuine test to see if they can stand on their own? So introducing the character, making them at least kind of known in the circles that are reading that book, It's like if you're reading X-Men comics, it's like, who is this Hope Summers person? That's not normally a question you'd ask yourself. You're like, okay, I'm familiar with her, even if, she wasn't around for very long. And then by making them kind of central to the plot, I feel like, again, it's kind of testing the waters to see if they could carry their own title. And I don't understand. I don't know how else they would be able to do that.
I just feel like, I feel like whenever they do that, they do this weird thing. It is comics, and they do it all the time with everybody, but their power levels or their importance is so high in those stories. And then when the story's over...
No, I feel...
What?
You're like orbiting this one concept, and I just really am waiting for you to say it.
I know. Oh, now the pressure's on, and I don't know what it is.
No, you're talking about Mary Sue's, and that's true. I didn't think to bring that up, but that's an issue here with new characters,
right?
And it is also there's usually, it's like a Newtonian thing. It's like for every force there's an opposite force, or what, I don't do science, but you get it. It's true. I mean, when there's an element where if a writer tries to push a new character, especially one that they're like, oh, and they can eat suns, too hard, there's generally backlash,
right?
Or at least there can be. And I think that it's often, as a matter of fact, there's something really interesting here in terms of comparing this to diversity, because I would never want to defend the chuds out there that are against the diversity sort of things, that push. But there is an issue where a lot of people were resistant to these new quote unquote diversity characters, but not exclusively because of that they were including sort of other different groups ethnic groups
more about certain things.
Yeah, well, but what I'm saying is some of the criticism was just like, these are just Mary Sue characters. Right. Like, it's good that they're ethnically diverse and they have a number of different gender identities and sexual orientations and stuff. The problem is you've just introduced this character and demanded that they be the most important thing in the stories they're a part of. And yeah, I mean, like, fans have a kind of a natural resistance to that. Yeah. They have even before those sets of issues too.
Yeah, I feel like there's a difference between the importance to the story, because, I mean, how else are they going to drive stories, even if it's a new character or not? Like, if the story involves that character, they're going to be important. They're usually going to be the more powerful one in the story because they have to overcome whatever challenge is happening. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the whole power level thing and, like, who's more powerful, this person's introduced and they're super powerful. How are they more powerful than Superman? I mean, you got to think, like, why does Superman always have to be the most powerful one? Like, why not have somebody else come in and stuff? But I get that people might feel a little insecure and, don't want their...
Well, it's to me, it's less about the power level. That's part of it. That's an indicator. Another issue is just about significance. So a good example, it's like, if you read a book and it's just a completely enclosed thing, and there's new characters all abound because it's a new book. It's a sort of the beginning of this world. The new character, it's fine. You can say this story is about this character. The problem is when you take these long-standing stories that have existed for 40, 50 years, or even within themselves, like 2 years, like, say, story arcs. And the reason I say this is, like, so it's sort of like the X-Men. If you read the X-Men, there are certain characters you've grown to love. You pick up the X-Men because you love these characters. They develop the stories and everything like that. Now, if all of a sudden a new writer comes on and they introduce a new character and they say, look, now the X-Men's about this character. And that, that's a writer's choice. The problem is it's also the fan's choice to be like, but I liked the characters this thing was about. So I think this is where it comes from. But I'll give you an example of a good thing, because I don't think newness is bad by any means. I wanted to do this episode, right? So Empire is a story that's coming up in Marvel, and Hulkling is now a central figure. He's this, if you don't know, he's like half Kree, half Skrull, and he's like royalty to both. So he's combining the Empire, and it looks like, we don't know, but it looks like he's attacking Earth.
And also Wiccan's boyfriend.
But the point is, that's true. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's kind of the point, is that Hulkling wasn't just some new character they had created just to do this story. So we had to be like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to care about this guy now. No, he's a character that they've been cooking, so to speak, for the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. and, slowly developed him over a period of time, got some fan support, did different stories, and now he's being centrally, featured. So I think that's cool.
Right. I agree. I mean, that's like best case scenario for comic book readers and for the medium in general. Everybody's familiar with this character or have seen him around, and the story makes sense on why he's so important. I mean, he's part of those people that are going to be the threat or whatever's happening. So it just makes sense. I mean, we can't always get that kind of thing though with new characters. I don't mind it. I mean,
no,
when new characters are introduced and I don't know, they're more important or they're more powerful or what have you, I don't mind it necessarily because you get to see these characters you've read for years or your entire life interact with somebody different. I mean, if the Justice League only interacted with the same 7 all the time, yes, the dynamic, but like, what else is going to happen? Like,
yeah, exactly. It would just get too formulaic, too episodic.
Right.
Like,
true.
Oh no, they're going to win again. After
Batman's
facing
brooding
some
again.
random faceless thug.
That's the name.
Random faceless thug.
Well, yeah, and rather than just be prescriptive or what have you, and saying this is what they should do or shouldn't do, I'll just sort of comment from a descriptive direction and say that I think the way most of the time it doesn't work that way. Most of the time, new characters, as I kind of keep saying, they just kind of fail. And not horribly, but like what happens is they're introduced, they're written about, and then they fall into obscurity. And I think the reason that happens is that a writer, whomever it is in whatever position, in whatever context, they write some new character and they're churning that story out. But for that character to get traction, to have real staying power, they have to, ignite the imagination of other people.
Right.
They have to get they have to, fans enjoy it and, I don't know, give their feedback, but also they have to get other writers, other creators to want to explore that character. And that to me is that critical step that if that doesn't happen, and if not writers, the editorial staff for whatever reason, but either way, if that doesn't happen, these characters generally appear, have maybe 2 or 3 years of some sort of spotlight, and then they just kind of fade away.
Right. I mean, there's something to say though about, and this is a different, I was thinking about this with the episode. So they're not necessarily new characters, but they're being reintroduced, or they've kind of been in the background so long, or they haven't been in comics for years and a new generation has started reading. So a good example that I can think of is like Gold Balls from Miles Morales. And with the whole Brian Michael Bendis run. So he was, he's in X-Men and he's the way they wrote him in Miles, he was a great supporting character and also a great friend. And then he became more involved in the actual X-Men comics. So I think there's something interesting between a character that's kind of been around, or there's been the concept of the character, but I guess the first iteration or whatever wasn't doing well. There's a new generation that could read and they reintroduce them in a new way, maybe making them younger or putting them with a different person. So like an X-Men character with Spider-Man. So I always thought that was interesting because I was rereading some of the Miles Morales comics recently and I was like, I really like Gold Balls. That's an odd sentence.
Yeah, let's cut that and use it outside the that context.
No, okay, Fabio. I'll say I really like Fabio. But he becomes important in Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. So it's interesting to see that kind of transition from kind of being known to really being nowhere to being introduced again and then coming up to, the level that they're at now. So I just thought that was interesting.
And honestly, that's a great example of, another writer seeing that character and who was actually relatively obscure or sort of ancillary and being like, oh, I have use for that.
Right.
That character's interesting. They could work in this context. And that's great. And that's the kind of thing, that keeps. Now, this one's a bit random because of how Jonathan Hickman uses him. I don't want to spoil it too much, but he's involved in the sort of resurrection that the X-Men do. But either way, yeah, so, and I think for characters to actually continue that, they have to have, enough sort of like potential or value that they'll keep getting retaken up like that. Another one I wanted to introduce was just this is not as common, and it's like the biggest gamble as far as I'm concerned, but it can pay huge dividends, which is a character just being introduced in their own monthly title as a new character. In other words, it's pretty rare, but like Invincible is a great example of that, where this was just a new comic that came out with a brand new hero, and here's the story. I mean, you can imagine why that's difficult, though.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like with those, or at least with me, so you're talking about Image Comics Invincible, right?
No, well, Image Comics, but I mean, you could be talking about a title within Marvel or DC as well.
No, I just wanted to be sure that's the one you were talking about. I feel like with those, if the person's not like a diehard Image fan or likes to read the new stuff that's not, you know what I mean, then I feel like it takes a little bit for today. Like you have to have like comic book shop owners or other creators or people that have some influence in the industry reading those comics and then telling people you need to read this comic. Kind of like what I've tried to do with Saga on this podcast for the last almost 2 years. It's like you need to read Saga because it's this good, and only because I feel like a lot of people haven't read this or it is new. I mean, it's not the big two, it's not this or whatever. So yeah, I feel like they could have a harder time if people don't read their comics.
Well, that's the point, which is it doesn't have a built-in audience. It requires a lot of, marketing, essentially. Or it has to be, there's another thing that happens here, which is like oftentimes really like celebrity level creators will use their clout to push their book. Right. And initially they're selling themselves. They're sort of like, great example is Spawn, or really any of the Image. I don't like it either, but because I feel like he also Spawn to me was always this insanely derivative character. He's just like, oh yeah, Venom and Ghost Rider. I'm a genius. Anyway,
edgy, edgy.
But yeah, exactly. But point being, Todd McFarlane in the '90s was this phenomenon in the industry, and so he, basically people were buying Spawn. Number one, this brand new character that he was producing because Todd McFarlane was big, and they wanted to just see what he was doing, essentially drawing, because he wasn't really much of a writer at the time. I thought
you were about to say pimp.
Yeah, he was it's total pimp, and it's not easy, but I mean, and what's funny here is that right there, you can see that mode of introducing characters. It has foibles because, one, a lot of times for it to be successful, it needs either a big marketing push or some sort of celebrity energy, or it'll just nobody's going to read it. It's kind of, if I was just like, hey, there's a new superhero that I'm writing, you've never heard about him, would you read my comic? You would spit in my face, and right, But yeah, so that's very clearly a pretty successful way. If it takes off, those characters really do, like Spawn, Savage Dragon, Hellboy. These characters are just like part of the comedy community. Those characters aren't going anywhere. So it feels like if that works, those characters really get traction. I was going to say, I do think it's worth thinking about some new characters that have sort of taken off and feel very cemented, and just trying to
feel
sort of
like new characters anymore.
Yeah, well, or that they feel like yes, almost like how they're classics now, but they're less than 10 years old. Yeah. So I think I mentioned like Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, Miles Morales, Spider-Man, these characters like Jessica Cruz. You've talked about Jessica a lot, but I just feel like she's just one of the Green Lanterns. She's as important now as like Kyle.
I feel like, not to, I won't get into it too much because we've already talked about it. No, but I only feel like the way she was introduced was a great way to introduce a new character. She came in during a big event as something else and then continued. And then she got her own comic, and she was on all this, and she had a great comic run, and she still does. And I feel like just her relatability, I just feel like that's such a great way to introduce a character, being like, she's in this event, you probably won't see her again, but then you do. Mm-hmm. So, that's just a good example of a good way to introduce a character.
So, overall, in summation for the last 30 minutes, It's a preference, matter of preference, you know.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I'd say it combines. It has to combine a lot for these characters to really become part of the canon. And not just like sort of one-time things, like they have to be. It helps if they have a connection to a legacy character or a famous character, like Miles Morales. He's very much his own character, but clearly playing a lot off of what we already understand about the Spider-Man story. But they have to add new stuff. They can't just be like the same character, with a slightly like a different first name or a different like secret identity. You have to have some meat, some variety, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then the last thing before we get to our picks, I was going to say, I asked you guys to think of like a bad example of new characters. Or are there any characters that have come out in the last 10 years that you just like, no, I said no? Is there anything, does anything come to mind?
Damage from DC.
Which one?
Like the most recent one.
The new one.
Yeah, I can't. I can't. I don't like him. I don't like the character himself. I'm like the first 3 issues was like this weird like destruction, whatever, and then him waking up like, what did I do? It's like, okay, you're the Hulk, I guess. Like, I don't know what is happening here. He just didn't do anything for me as a character. I think that whole thing of them trying to introduce all these new characters that came from like Dark Knight's Metal or whatever the event was just it didn't really go too well for me.
I totally get that.
One. I feel like the ones that annoyed me tended to fade into obscurity or were killed off. Yeah.
I mean, can you think of any that did die, like that got killed off, or is it just like that's just the general feeling?
That's just the general feeling. Like I'm going through I'm just like looking at the list of top 50 here. None of them really stand out as a major annoyance. Although going off of I don't know. Yeah, none of them really bother me. I feel like, because again, it's kind of preference. If I don't like something, I won't read it. So
yeah,
accurate.
Well, to be fair to that list, I did pick the ones I thought were the best. So it was like, but fair enough. I have to run this. I wanted to address this on the podcast anyway. This is a good opportunity. Did you guys check out that Safe Space and Snowflake thing? The new Warriors rollout?
No, I did not.
Oh, well, you fucked up because it is flagrantly ridiculous.
I mean, just by the name.
I know.
We could do a podcast on it all its own, and people have, because but basically the New Warriors, there's a relaunch. It hasn't come out. It literally got interrupted by the pandemic. But it's just these new sort of like a relaunch of the New Warriors where they introduce these new characters, which would be fine. And they've been on Joe Rogan's show. Like it's been on Twitter. Like it's trended on Twitter, like how clunky and awful. It's just like, it's not that it's woke. I mean, I think this is where people just lose it a little bit here. It's that it's Disney's corporate co-opting of wokeness. So it's like they just get, like, one of the characters is like screen time, and he's like got internet powers, and then this character Snowflake is like gender non-binary, which is great, but the character sucks. So if you're gender non-binary, your like first character gets to be shitty or whatever. But the point is, it's like, what I hate about it is it's just like this Kibblesmith guy who's a good writer. I read his Loki series. And I don't know if this was his idea that he pitched or he got assigned to this thing, but it's just like this 40-year-old dude's, this fucking 40-year-old neo-libs like idea of what kids are like today. So it has the quality of like that Steve Buscemi like a meme where it's like, my fellow kids or whatever it is. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Fellow youths or whatever. And it's just so, it's so bad. But anyway, so that would be one. You guys check it out and laugh. Okay. I will try. So we decided to do, we're not necessarily doing our normal spotlights. We're kind of doing like a quick Russian roulette in a way.
Russian roulette. Oh, God.
I don't know, of like new characters.
6 characters enter, 1 character leaves.
Yeah, who's the best? Of new characters that came out in the last 10 years that we like. And we're not going over their entire history because that would be an entire other episode, and we don't want to talk your ears off for 10 hours.
I don't think anybody listening is like, why didn't they do more? There's no way.
And I mean, to be fair, most of these characters we're probably going to talk about later in more length in the future. But this is just to let them know, like, these are the characters we really liked in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to start it off, Kayla?
Oh, yeah. That was my cue. Completely missed it. All right. So when you guys were talking about doing this episode, I automatically thought of this character, not only because he's in the Bat family. Actually, that's probably why. So I'm going to start us off with doing Luke Fox. If you don't know him, you are probably familiar with his father, Lucius Fox. Who's, of course, the genius scientist and inventor for Batman, comes up with his gear, but also the president and CEO of Wayne Enterprises. So Luke is his son. And he seems to have his father's intellect, and Luke graduated from MIT, double degrees in engineering and business management.
A lot of time.
And because his father is basically in charge of Wayne Enterprises, his job opportunities were off the chain. But Lucas had other aspirations. He wanted to join Batman's crime-fighting family, so he decided to start boxing and cage fighting, hoping that Batman would be like, hey, that kid's good. I want him to be on my team. Much to the disappointment of his father. Can you imagine graduating from MIT, going like, yes, my son, following in my footsteps. And he's like, I want to be a boxer and punch people in the face. Hope
I'm Chuck Liddell. Yeah.
And by the way, just for timeline.
No, it's Kayla.
Yeah.
Kayla, it's more like, I don't want you to hurt people. I want you to be a scientist. Anyway, I got another call. Oh, Mr. Wayne, yes, I've sharpened your shurikens so they'll cut throats extra good.
I added electricity to your gauntlets. But yeah, and for timeline-wise, this is all taking place around Batman Incorporated timeline. Which would be important because Luke does end up getting, catching the attention of Batman. And when the first Batwing retires, and Batwing is the Batman of Africa, his name is like, I have it here, David Zavimbe. When he retires, Batman's like, I'm going to give Luke a shot. So he sends him over to Africa to be the Batman Incorporated, the Batman of Africa over there, which to me is a little bit problematic. I would have probably just assumed that he probably should have found someone in Africa to be Batman of Africa instead of someone born in the States. But okay.
Right.
But maybe Bruce doesn't know anybody in Africa. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I think Bruce knows everything at this point. He could do a little bit of research on his Bat computer and come up with a Bat answer, okay?
True.
If they do another crossover, by the way, it's just going to be Batman telling Black Panther he's the new Batman of Africa. You're the new Batman of Africa. But I'm the Black Panther.
Is joining the Bat family. That's never a sentence I thought I would say out loud. I love it. When he accepts the job of being Batman of Africa, it kind of leads to a fallout with his father, who was already obviously upset about his life choices. Next appearance outside of Batman Incorporated, Batman Eternal, where he deals with the Joker's daughter. Should be familiar with fans. I think her face is pretty familiar at this point, right? And then he also begins, he makes an appearance in Batgirl, where he starts dating Barbara Gordon. And they fight crime together as Batwing and Batgirl. I'm just laughing because apparently my favorite characters all date Barbara Gordon at some point.
There's a connection, for sure.
They all have good taste in Batgirls, is all I'm saying, because Babs is the best.
I think somebody's living vicariously through Barbara Gordon.
I totally am.
And it's Noah. I mean, okay, yeah.
Oh, it is.
I mean, I'm fine with that.
He kind of fades to into the background, the fate of an unsuccessful kind of side character for a while, but he comes back in DC Rebirth. After the death of Tim Drake, he kind of becomes a full-fledged member of the Bat family. One of my favorite panels is when he's going to dinner at like this random fast food restaurant with like, I think Jason, Dick, Damian, and Bruce is there. And they're fighting over like which toy Damien's gonna get in his kid's meal. And he's like, I swear to God, if it's the Red Hood, I'm gonna freak out. And Jason's like, yes, be the Red Hood. And he opens it and it is. And it's basically just Luke going like, what have I done to myself? Why am I in this crazy family? It's one of my favorite things ever. And it's probably what drew me to the character.
And speaking of that, like one of the things I like about Luke is that he's related to Lucius, and I don't think that shouldn't always be that way. You don't always need to like make this character what do you call it, like I don't know, it's like that. It's like the Star Wars thing where it's like they don't all have to be related to or have special genes. Yeah. But in the Batman family, it's almost the opposite. Like Batman's always collecting these random people, and that's great. But it's kind of cool that this one is actually, Luke is actually, has reason to be in the family, and I just think that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, we all saw.
When I thought about it too, I kind of thought it was a little silly to be like, "Here's my son, my long lost son, who we never mentioned before." I mean, it works, though, because if we're talking about reasons characters can stay, I mean, you're tying him to an already popular character in Batman comics, so it's very smart to do that.
Right.
Right.
But yeah.
Also, why would Lucius be talking about his son anyway? It's like, Mr. Wayne, the security system that I've built reminds me of my son. I don't know if I mentioned him, but
I feel like they don't really do small talk. Like Batman just sends him like a bad email and is like, I need 10,000 bat rings, please. And then that's it. And he's trying to send him like a picture of his son's birthday party. He's like, that's not bat rings.
I could listen to Batman small talk all day though. Let me tell you. All right, Lucius, how you doing?
That's not how things. That's just Christian Bale. Stop it. God damn it.
But yeah, so basically in Rebirth, the current comics, Tim Drake isn't actually dead, of course, but he kind of fills in that like the tech expertise role because of his connection with Lucius. He was kind of a natural replacement to fill the void that Tim Drake left behind in the meantime. And that kind of brings you up to date. Look out for Luke Fox because he's a pretty cool dude.
Wherever he may be.
Batwing.
Part boxer, part tech genius. MIT grad.
Mm-hmm.
All Batwing.
All Batwing.
Jared, go.
No, you said me last.
Oh.
I'll go now, but let's be clear about whose fault this was.
I'm cutting this out. So it's
oh, but I win. Okay, anyway. So the character that I want to do is a character called Hazmat. Okay. Now, I'm banking on the fact that a lot of you listening to this probably aren't as familiar with this character because she hasn't been hugely breakout, but she's been consistent in a few really strong stories as far as I'm concerned. So Hazmat, her first appearance was, by the way, Avengers Academy #1, August 2010. So she just made the deadline in like the 10-year mark here. Yeah, exactly. Her name's Jennifer Takeda. She's a Japanese American, and she has a bit of like a rogue story, like literally like Rogue, the character, because Hazmat's powers manifested, and when she was making out with her boyfriend for the first time, and then he got sick and he went into a coma, because it turns out Jennifer has the latent, which activated ability to generate massive amounts of radioactivity. Now she can do this in like intense ways. She can like melt steel walls and stuff like that if she directs her sort of radioactive power. But which I found out would be an insane amount of radioactivity. But anyway, but she always sort of leaks sort of radioactive energy, and she has to wear a containment suit to prevent herself from. Exactly, but it's like ironic because it's the reverse. Because in this case, she's keeping it in. Like a big fart. Anyway, so she has to, or she'll like poison everybody around her.
I got it.
Now, spoiler alert to shoot for it. She doesn't need the suit anymore, which is kind of cool. She kind of grew out of it in a way, but that was like a big that was a big part of her character for a long time. And actually, the image looks so cool. I think she'll probably, if I had to guess, she'll go back to it. I think that was a cool part of the character. I think they wanted to kind of develop her past it, like she doesn't have that crutch anymore. But I think because it explores this really cool tension, they'll probably come back to it. And that's kind of why I love this character. Jennifer is an asshole. Like she describes herself like, I've always been a hater. Even before I had powers, I've hated shit. I love her. Yeah, she's great. Like, because she's been through a lot, and I think that's what's really cool. Her power, she's got that dynamic of like, her powers automatically create, like, her greatest strength is her greatest weakness. She's dangerous to everybody. I like the fact that she's sort of like old beyond her years. She's very cynical about how shitty the world is. And I think also it's kind of cool. She's just been through a lot in the comics that we've seen. So what happens basically with her story, just to like summarize it really quickly, is that she's one of the Avengers Academy characters. And what that was Norman Osborn, when he was in charge of a bunch of shit, like when he was in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he turned into Hammer. Anyway, when he was in charge, he like found these kids who were like, had like powers that were exploitable, and he was like kind of torturing them, and he was going to train them to be as like young soldiers. Well, he got overthrown. The Avengers find out about these kids, and they realize, oh, these kids are like all at super danger of being supervillains. So Norman decides, okay, the Avengers like, we got to put them in a special academy and make sure they become superheroes. So she's in that list, and that series, by the way, is really good. You should check it out. But what's really cool about it, and I think her character sort of exemplifies this concept more than most, is that you don't actually know if these characters are going to end up being good. Like, you don't take for granted their heroism in the beginning, and they are in a lot of situations whether they're going to get revenge on Norman Osborn, or if they want to kill, or whether it'll be easy to be a villain. So with this character, there for a lot of her history, there was like, okay, she seems to have a good heart, but she might just like fuck shit up out of anger or frustration. So it's super cool. And then she sort of falls in love with this other character who's like bound in this, named Metal. He's like in a big metal cyborg, and he can't get out of it. Okay, so he's the only one that can like
on the nose.
Well, here's the thing. She's from an ensemble team book. That's how it always works. Like, you know what I mean? Like the character's like, your electricity shoots out of your eyes. What's your name? Oh, it's Shock Eyes. Shock Eyes is my name. Why? Is that wrong? It's just so you could have their name under their image or whatever. Anyway, so the point is, like, she falls in love with this dude who has metal power, who's like stuck in it as this giant metal monster, kind of like a metal version of the Thing. So they're the only one that, like, what do you call it? Like, they're the only one. He's the only one that won't die from like Stuppiner or whatever. So, and then he gets killed. So the only person, spoilers, so the only person that she can love gets murdered. It's just very sad. She's been through a lot, is what I'm saying. Yeah, she got kidnapped in this thing called Avengers Arena, which was like Marvel's version of the Hunger Games. So she's trapped in an arena and forced to kill other young heroes. It was very sad. So anyway, this character is great. Yeah, she's been in like 4 or 5 series.
Hyped me up to read her depressing, cynical stories.
She really is. Like, it's awesome because she's very sad and depressed for a lot of the series. But the thing is, her powers fuck shit up, and so she's always the character that you kind of want to like come around the corner and like kill the shit out of the bad guy. You know what I mean? That one. Like, oh, she's mad now. Oh, fuck. Okay, so yeah, so I actually think there's so much substance and potential to this character. She's been in, like I said, like 3 or 4 different series, so other people have sort of seen that potential, and I'm really hoping she's going to kind of get taken up again, like maybe one of the next Avengers, or maybe Thunderbolts or something like that. They'll include her, and I really hope that happens. So
okay. And that's Hazmat.
Mm-hmm. That is Hazmat.
Okay, so my pick is John Kent, little Superboy, Superman's son.
I'm so surprised you chose him.
because he's so close to Damien.
Look, I'm not one to talk. I literally was like, Batfam? Who can I add from the Batfam? Like I always do.
Every topic, even if it's Marvel specific, she's like, who fought him in the crossover? I will do that because somehow they're connected. No, so I picked Jonathan Kent because I feel like as far as a character that's the son of a major character, they've handled him fairly well until Brian Michael Bendis got his hands on him. But I feel like, I mean, he first appeared in 2015, so he's not that old as far as comics go. The way they described how he came to this earth and how the Superman was the Superman that fought Doomsday originally, it was an interesting story. I like how they explained why he was able to be and what he is to the current super family. But I feel like it's interesting to see what Superman would have been like at that age, or if he was more human than not, and how he discovered his powers. So, I mean, how Jonathan Kent discovered he had laser vision as he fried his cat. So, but you kind of grow with him. Yeah, it's pretty upsetting. He was really upset about it, but you get to see him grow a little bit. And the best thing about this character is that since Batman had a son and Superman had a son, they had a Super Son team. And it sounds ridiculous. When I first saw this comic was coming out, I rolled my eyes. But then I read the comic, and it was really good. So.
Now, it's really good in a way that, honestly, the Batman and Superman team up is less good to me. The Batman and Superman team up I've always felt a bit contrived. Not awful, well written at times, but it's like, okay, you guys just stuck these characters together. And they have some interesting contrast. In this case, it really does feel like you can see why they would be friends. You can see why they would need each other. It's a great comic.
Right. And whenever this was happening, whenever this was happening, Damian was running the Teen Titans. Jonathan Kent was still coming into his own and trying to figure out how to be a superhero. So there's this really kind of sad, and you make you feel bad for him, but anytime they're hanging out and Damien's like, oh, the Teen Titans stuff I need to go. And Jonathan's like, well, can I go? And he's like, no, you're not ready. And then little baby Damien jumps off a roof. It's like, both of you are tiny children. Like, what are you, what? But I really like this character, and I'm excited to see where they go with him. I don't like how they're calling him Superboy, even though he's literally Superboy, but Connor Kent is right there. But whatever, I guess it's the same thing with the Flash and how many Flashes they can handle. But one of the mysteries about him is Batman did research and said that due to John's unique genetic makeup, he might be more powerful than Superman when he gets older. So we'll see if Superman has gotten his mantle dethroned.
Superman isn't going to be the most powerful. It's going to be Superman.
Yes.
Man, I don't think Superman's the most powerful now.
I mean, he is. He really is. I don't count Dr. Manhattan. That just doesn't count.
Why not?
Because plot device.
Yeah,
that's my first pick. I like him a lot.
Oh, by the way, you mentioned that Bendis, I don't know if you said this, that he aged him. So because you hate Bendis because he aged.
No, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to talk about bad things.
Well, here's the thing, Jumpy. What I was going to say is I think he'll probably be de-aged. I could be wrong, but that would be my bet. That because it's a time travel element, people are really freaked out about this. I think he'll probably go back. Right,
but there's the whole 5G event that they're talking about is rumored to come out where Damian and Jonathan are actually literally going to replace Batman and Superman.
Yeah, for 3 years tops.
Okay, well, that's 3 years.
They can't fool. I agree, but they can't fool me anymore. I don't believe in their bullshit.
My second new character is also from DC. She's Jin the second, because there's the first one that we're not going to talk about because that's not my choice. And also, guess what she is? A Jin, which is basically, if you don't know, a genie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought that was a little on the nose. And literally, it says that she's called. She doesn't have a name, and there's a purpose for that, which we'll get to in a bit. She's over 4,000 years old, and she's a female Jin, which is really rare among her kind. And the female Jins are called Scylla, and I'm like, Scylla is a perfectly good girl's name. Why not call her Scylla instead of Jin? That's a little
True.
on the nose, but.
True.
Anyway, look up a picture of her because she just looks badass. I really like her aesthetic. And she was introduced in the Teen Titans special. I think relatively recently, 2018. So, There's not much on her yet, but we were promised more in the future. But she's basically there from Damien's run of the Teen Titans, so you have to put up with reading Damien. I'm sorry if you want to get to know Jin better.
True.
What fresh hell is this?
But basically, she was part of like a team of Jins led by her eldest brother Elias, and Elias kind of led the Jins against humanity to try to free themselves because they were made to be subjugated by humanity. And Jins are kind of like genies where they'll grant you wishes, things like that. And so Elias is trying to find the Stone of Souls, but it's protected by a group of children because plot reasons. And Jin is like, I'm going to not kill the children because I'm a good genie. And Elias is like, no. And then revealing the true face, which is that of the devil. So she's the devil's little sister. Elias kind of took her ring and imprisoned her and forced her to kill the children protecting the Stone of Souls, but he wasn't able to get it. So basically, for thousands of years, he used Jin, who the reason she doesn't have a name is because he hates her so much that he's like, you don't deserve a name. You're just going to be Jin because that's what you are. And he uses her to just perform evil deeds, killing people. Part of her tragic backstory is that she's like, I have blood I can never wash off my hands.
Are you sure you didn't, like, it seems like you picked a character from my Rolodex.
I just, again, if you look at a picture, it's like, oh, what a cute little girl. And she has, like, little markings on her face. It reminds me of the Dalish and Dragon Age. And then you read about her story, and it's quite sad. Yeah. She basically, one of the masters that had her ring that was forcing her to do terrible things, had a servant named Dahi, and he felt sorry for her, took the ring that bound her and gave her freedom. So now she's on the run and hides. And she tries to use her powers to kind of make up for the thousands of years of history and murder. But if she uses, yeah, right. It's also not her fault. That's something I guess you'd have to come to terms with. But she was forced to do these things. It wasn't like, oh, I realized murder is wrong and I'm going to try to change. It was like I was forced to do this by my evil, psychotic brother, who's the devil. But if she uses too much of her power, Elias, her older brother, can kind of detect her, so she has to be very careful with, and I guess it's kind of a way of kind of limiting her magic and not making her too OP. But if she uses too much of her power, Elias will find her, which is pretty darn cool. Fun fact, she got kissed by Crush, which is, like, girl, so Jin kissed me. So she might be bisexual, she might be gay, we're not sure.
She's a genie. They do what they want.
Yeah, true. Right? Maybe she's just pansexual. She's just like, whatever. But yeah, so that's kind of the touchstone of Jin. She's on the Teen Titans, even though she's technically 4,000 years old. She's killed so many people, and she's the sister of the devil who is actively trying to hunt her down.
Hell yeah.
She's got that cool, like, ultimate power, potentially, but, like, bound by some other stuff, like classic genie trope.
Classic.
Well, that too, but yeah.
I like it. I like her a lot. Good pick.
It's like phenomenal cosmic power, itty bitty little ring.
I love it. My reference.
Thank you. Well, my character, this is what I'm really happy about, and like I think Ghost. So I picked. Yeah, exactly. I switched at the last moment. No, so I'm doing the all new Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, and for me, he's like tomatoes. And the reason that is because I used to hate tomatoes, but I finally made myself eat them, and I was like, that's my favorite food now. And
I really like
that's true.
Comparison.
Yeah, thank you. And same thing. I didn't like this character initially. Like not because there was anything wrong with Robbie Reyes, but I just really like Ghost Rider. So like something that replaced him, I was kind of on the fence about at least. But the series is very well done, and moreover, the who is opening a peppermint right now? Holy shit! Anyway, god damn, and it's like church. Some old lady opening a butterscotch slowly, and that just makes it worse. Anyway, so here's no, fair enough. So here's the thing. Okay, so the Ghost Riders now are more like I was saying before, like Green Lanterns, where honestly, it's not just that there have been a lot, but there are kind of like a lot of Ghost Riders active at the same time. But Robbie's like the third major one. There's been a shit ton in Marvel's timeline. He's like the third big one, right? After Johnny Blaze and Dan Ketch. And the story is basically he's this East LA mechanic who is an all-around awesome guy, but he lives in a super rough neighborhood, and it's just him and his little brother Gabe, who's paraplegic, which is a little crunchy from a storytelling perspective, but whatever. So he's a good guy taking care of his paraplegic little brother, and he's a muscle car mechanic. Or I guess just mechanic or whatever. But to earn money, he's like he does these illegal street races, and there's one where he like steals this car or borrows it from work, this 1969 Charger, Dodge Charger, and he is in this race, and he's going to win $50,000. But it turns out there's two things in that car. Now, one were drugs, special drugs from the villainous Mr. Hyde, and because those drugs were in the car, Mr. Hyde's gang comes and kills him, like chases him down and shoots him dead. This is the first issue. It's very sad and awful. But the other thing that was in there, it turns out, was the car was haunted by the spirit of his uncle, who was a serial killer, who through demonic ritual gave him the power, like a Ghost Rider, so he could wreak vengeance. And he gets that vengeance,
so check
but then because he... Exactly. Oh my God, exactly. Dimbala, I beg of thee. Adwe, Dimbala, give the power, I beg of thee. Anyway, so it's awesome, and just deal with it. Anyway, so he gets the power of Ghost Rider or something like it. I'll explain in a second, from his evil satanic uncle who is dead and haunting the car, the Charger. And he, Robbie uses the power of his goodness to tame his uncle's evil, but still use the power to be the Ghost Rider. By the way, if you don't know, Ghost Rider is basically because this flaming skull thing who's like nigh indestructible, and he's got basically, I know he's got enchanted chains that he can use, which is where Spawn got him from, because Spawn is a ripoff of Ghost Rider. Anyway, and he has this cool ability called the Penance Stare, which makes you like feel all the sin and pain you've ever caused. But usually, and this is where Robbie's this sort of diversion. Yes, usually there's a flaming motorcycle that can drive across water and up walls and shit. Awesome. In this case, he doesn't have. He has the Hell Charger, which is like a flaming version of a motorcycle. It is awesome. But yeah, so that's basically Robbie Reyes. And the thing I just think he's this one.
Like how you said.
Yeah, go ahead.
He has a Charger, which is the flaming version of a motorcycle.
Yeah, no, a Charger. A Charger is a car.
No, I know, but
people know that.
It's like a 4-wheeled motorcycle.
Yes, it's his version of the flaming motorcycle is what I'm trying to get at. Thank you, Noah. Anyway, But so what's actually kind of cool? So there's just some, and I'll end on this. He's got some cool additions that I think because I think he makes the perfect legacy character because he's got all the cool shit that the other characters had before him that make Ghost Rider great, but he has some sort of new attributes or like story elements that I think make him worth creating in the first place. So one is he's a good guy. Like most of the other ones, very tortured, very dark. They're heroes, but like very sort of seedy. Robbie's kind of unapologetically just like a nice, hardworking dude. So that's cool. He's only trying to protect his stepbrother. Other thing I like about him, he's not a loner. He's on the Avengers. He's actually been a big part of the Avengers lately and driven a lot of their stories. So that's cool too. He's like not afraid to get help or whatever. And then the last thing I'll say, just he added a little bit in the mythos because he's not a spirit of vengeance. The earlier Ghost Riders were possessed by demons like Zarathos or these like weird in-between divinities like Noble Kale or something like that. He is possessed by basically his uncle. His uncle kind of, when he died, because he's a Satanist, invoked these powerful demonic rituals. But so he's connected to this evil that he uses for good, which is the same sort of theme as before, but it's kind of a new take on it. And I just think that's really cool.
Like most palatable version of Ghost Rider I've ever heard. Because normally I just laugh at the concept because I feel like it's like something a 8-year-old Catholic boy drew on his paper. Like, he has a flaming skull, and he's a
so
demon.
True.
But this guy,
yeah, so true.
Bearable.
Yeah,
no, it's
really
true, and
cool.
it's like it's like they took that edgelord shit, which is great, and I'm attracted to, but they took that edgelord stuff and they filled it out with some more like heart and sort of robust, substantive story elements, and it's a badass. So check out that.
Magic.
Okay, and to end this, I have a pick that probably people would not expect me to pick, but kind of would if you've been paying attention.
Oh my god,
so,
is it a good person?
No, so it's Zelma Stanton, which is currently Doctor Strange's apprentice. So she was introduced in 2015. Both of my picks were 2015. Guess that was a good year.
But
And connected
by the way,
that you really love, so it's not much of a surprise. Oh no, it's related to Doctor Strange.
I so didn't predict this character that I had to add it to my major list.
Yep. Yeah, because he was like, who are you going to do? Who are you going to do? And I was like, well, probably Zelma. And he's like, what?
It's
yep, not on your list.
Noah, it's not on the list.
Yeah, I mean, what I like a lot about her is that she was thrown into the story. She was kind of like a bystander. They got thrown into the story, thrown into this big adventure with Doctor Strange, and then stayed. Which I don't see happen too often. Usually they kind of just go away or they're not really integral to the story anymore. And especially since he already has Wong. But Wong was not involved in the story. She wasn't magically inclined when she first started, but they got stranded in this weird world dimension. Doctor Strange got sick. Zelma used one of the spells that she had to transfer the sickness from him to her, and then ended up, since it was a weird world, changed her physiology and all this stuff. So she ended up getting magical powers and then becoming Doctor Strange's apprentice, but she's his librarian first and foremost.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason why she's his librarian is, if you read Jason Aaron's run with Doctor Strange, pretty much magic got wiped out throughout the entire universe, and Doctor Strange needs to rebuild it and needs to get all the spells back in order, pretty much fill his library again, and that's what Zelma Stanton is doing for him. But one of the cooler things, and I thought she was going to go away, which I was pretty sad about because I like her, she's really funny, and she also doesn't like dogs, which is funny because Doctor Strange has a ghost dog, so that's a really cool interaction. But she's running the Strange Academy,
and not Forrest Whitaker, by the way, not that ghost dog, like
No.
a literal ghost dog.
Yeah, yeah, and she's running the Strange Academy now, which only had like one issue until the pandemic happened. So.
It's had one issue, and it's my favorite comic now.
It's so good. It's really
besides Thor. But and if we were doing this episode a year from now, I think that we would have talked way more about Strange Academy, because they've introduced like 9 new characters, and I'm already in love with every one of them. They're awesome.
There's like this female, like really sweet frost giant that can't fit in any of the rooms, and she's always like looking inside the window when they're talking. It's so funny.
And a demon from Limbo that's basically like the basket case from the Breakfast Club.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so definitely check that out. And that's our picks for kind of our favorite or characters that we liked in the last 10 years or since that came out since 2010. I mean, we have a lot of other ones, but, you know, for time's sake. But real quick, before we go, we got a new Patreon subscriber.
Yay!
So that's always nice, and I love seeing that. So his name is Mahoney, which is actually a mutual friend of ours, which is really sweet. And we really appreciate that you believe in us so much that you're going to pay us, even though you're our friend.
Yeah, we have to pretend like Mahoney is not one of my best friends.
Yeah. So what we usually do is, depending on what tier they go into, but we always give the person a superhero name or supervillain or antihero name and power. So that's always fun. So do you guys have anything?
Obviously, I do.
Yeah, I was leaving it up to you for this one.
He's the master.
I'm going to let you guys help me out with a name, but here's the thing about Mahoney. Mahoney is like very modest and very humble, but he's like a very talented person. Like he's a hilarious stand-up comic. He's just like an interesting person. He's very like receptive. It's just really cool. Like he's one of the guys that I run a lot. Yeah, no, but I'm coming to it, bitch. Anyway, here's the thing. He's one of the people that I run ideas past and stuff like that. But so here's the thing. So I would argue that he has powers relative to expectations, and so whatever people think, like whatever villains especially think his power level is at, like whatever the ability is, he's like twice as powerful, right? So for instance, like if like a villain like assumes he's this strong, like assumes he's like of normal strength, then he's like, he can lift like, I don't know, 400 pounds instead of 200 pounds or something like that. So that would be my idea. So we just got to come up with a name.
I don't want to say modesty because that.
Yeah. No, since he's my friend, he has that awesome power that I gave him, but his name is Captain Fuckface.
I only got away with that because he's a friend.
Yeah. That's your name. Sorry, Mahoney.
Awesome power. You got to deal with that name. Sorry.
But he's humble about it. He's very modest. He's humble about it.
Yeah. That plays into it. Like the villain's like, oh, this is this Captain Fuckface. I don't care. And then he like melts your eyes with his laser vision that you didn't think he had.
Okay. Well.
Oh, we got to do recommendations.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have them ready?
Yeah.
I do. I'm literally holding the comic right now. Should I go first? I'll go first.
Yeah,
I'll go right now.
Yeah, let me.
Hell yeah.
Let me introduce it and then go ahead.
Do it.
All right, comic book recommendation time. We have not done this in quite some time, but we finally have an episode where we can do this. So go ahead, Jared.
So I'm recommending. It corresponds to my character Hazmat that I spotlighted. Avengers Arena. I mentioned it in the episode too. It's by, I can't remember the first guy's name, but it's something Hopeless, which is a weird last name, but makes sense for this title. And you could just get volume 1. I think they collected them all, but like just get the first one and see if you like it. I think you really will. And the artist is one of my favorite new guys. It's Kev Walker. He's the guy on the Doctor Strange series right now. But anyway, so this was that. It's basically a blatant homage, let's say, so we don't say ripoff of the Hunger Games or to Battle Royale. But it is so well executed. It has a follow up after they leave what's called Murder World, because it's Arcade, the big villain that does it. But it's just a great ensemble cast. It's, basically a bunch of kids, superheroes having to fight to survive. But I think the reason I want to recommend it especially is that not just for Hazmat, this introduces like a reader to probably 16 new, really, really well developed characters that also have a few people like X-23 and Darkhawk and stuff like that. Anyway, point is super good. Pick it up. I think you'll really like it.
Nice. Kayla, you got yours?
Yeah. I'm going to recommend it's tied to Jin. Teen Titans number 27. The cover is the iconic one where all of the Teen Titans are on it, but they have their mouths taped up, and they're like holding a sign about like their biggest kind of trouble or darkest secret.
Yes.
And yeah, right. Damien's is the one that says liar.
Hey, leave him alone. He's just a baby.
Jin's says not so innocent. So Teen Titans number 27 is the issue where Jin's backstory is revealed, and with Glass, the writer, going, I promise this is going to be a major story in the future book. I promise. So it kind of it's a tease, but you get to know her better, and it's actually just her background, her backstory. So it takes 27 issues for the Teen Titans to get there, but
they got
it's
there.
Worth it.
I'm going to recommend Super Sons. I feel like people that may not have picked it up because you thought it was silly, which it certainly is at times, but it is good. It's good. It's fun to see these miniature size versions of these two big superheroes and how they navigate that and how they become really good friends, even though Damien is a dick to him, but he's sweet.
He's a dick to everybody.
I know, but he likes him though. The art's by George Jimenez and it is written by Peter J. Tomasi. So I think he's written most of the ones that have come out. But yeah, I mean, you should read Super Sons because it's amazing and I want more of it. DH them, Brian Michael Bendis. All right. Well, that is it for us. Stay safe, guys.
Happy quarantining.
Thanks, dudes.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.